Welcome to Road to Cana, where we talk about marriage readiness for single Catholics.
On the road to Cana, there's gonna be terrain, 'cause a life of love takes time to find the way. On the road to Cana, remember who's the key, 'cause if marriage is to last, it will take three. 'Cause if marriage is to last, if marriage is to last, 'cause if marriage is to last, it will take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road.
Welcome back. We are here again with Father Edward Connolly, parish priest in the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Welcome back, Father.
Thank you, Mr. Buono.
We are here on beautiful Southern Catholic College campus in Georgia. It's been very pleasant here.
Beautiful.
And we are talking today about decision making. There is a lot of decisions that we make in life, and of course our topic is always on relationships and marriage, and of course marriage is a decision and love is a decision. So we're making decisions at every moment. So we want to talk about decision making and maybe problems with decision making. Certainly one phenomenon that is happening is that people are not making the decision to marry. They are, for whatever the reasons are, not making that decision. And part of the reason is probably because of whatever reason of fear or not ready or what have you. So from your observation as a priest, are people in general making good decisions in life, and is decision making becoming more and more of a problematic thing?
Well, Mr. Buono, about 14 years ago, you made the best decision you ever made in your life. I think you married Mrs. Buono. So are people making good decisions? Some people are, and some people are not. You would like to know the etymology or the origin of the word decision, wouldn't you, please? Yes?
I would, yes,
You
like
would.
to know the etymology.
Good, I'm glad. I'm so glad, because if you didn't want to know it, I would tell you anyway. The word decision, like the word incision, like the surgeon makes an incision, which means he cuts into something. So the basic meaning of the word decision is cut. So cut away from something, cut away. So to make a decision is to cut something away from something else. Before you married Mrs. Buono, I presume there were several young women that you saw, I guess, perhaps you saw as possible prospective marriage partners. And perhaps she saw several young men as possible prospective marriage partners. But you can't marry all of them, because that's known as polygamy, which is not only illegal but immoral. And so at some point you said, well, I have to cut. Okay, so you cut all the others away except Bridget, and you made that decision, you to marry Mrs. Buono, and she did the same. Some people, they just can't make that cut. I imagine that if a young man or young woman is studying to be a doctor and they want to be a surgeon, the first time they ever go into an operating room to make an incision, I imagine that's an awesome moment to cut into another human being, even for a noble purpose.
Probably a nervous moment as well.
Right. And we hope that the surgeon who operates on us, if necessary, is a decisive person and an incisive person, okay? So they make the right decision, so they make the right incision. So in order to make the correct decision, one needs to have a certain firmness of will, okay? And a certain confidence in God, and therefore confidence in oneself, okay? We're not talking now about self-centeredness or pomposity, but we're talking about self-confidence.
Right. Yeah, I would think that there is there's probably an attraction about in relationships, those who are dating, to see that confidence come out. And confidence is a person who's willing to make a decision. I mean, in other words, if you can see somebody who can make decisions or is willing to make decisions, especially probably most of them are little decisions, right?
Right.
Yeah, you could actually feel confident that they can make a decision when it comes to the big stuff, right?
Right.
I assume women probably more so in this category are looking for that in men. You know, can they make a decision, or are they just always asking, well, I don't know, maybe, what do you want to do? I don't know. You know, I mean, this could be a sign of things to come. Who knows?
Yeah. I think a woman appreciates a man who is able to say to her, this is what I think we should do. What do you think? You know, and then she can say yes or no, but at least he came up with a plan. In fact, this is not something I'm inventing. I will not mention the young lady's name, but there's a young woman in my parish for whom I have great respect. She's a bright young woman, a virtuous young woman, and she has a boyfriend. And what she wants her boyfriend to do, she told me, is when he comes to take her out on a date, that he already have a plan in his head for what they are going to do. She doesn't want to simply him to come to the house and then go out and then they go through the, you know, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do with it? She wants a game plan. Now, it doesn't mean that she is going to, you know, simply go along with his game plan. She wants to review his game plan, but she wants to know, what is the game plan, you know? There's a term that, of course, all teenagers use, and even some 20-somethings use. They talk about hanging out with their friends, like, I'm going out now, what are you going to do? I'm just going to hang out. And I don't know if that's psychologically a healthy thing to do, just to hang out, because you're putting yourself then in the situation of saying, well, I'm just going to be there and I will see what happens, so I will be part of the flotsam and jetsam on the ocean of life to see, you know, what wave comes along to pick me up and carry me there. So if I happen to be with a group of people and they're smoking pot, well, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to smoke pot. You know, they're going to get bombed out of their minds on booze. You know, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. Or suppose they say, you know, well, you know, it'd be nice to knock off a convenience store. You know, well, I'm just hanging out, so I guess, you know, not a good thing to do. Decisive people, not people who are tyrannical, not little Hitlers, but people who are able to say this and not this.
Yeah, exactly. And again, if your point in getting into a relationship in the first place, or you're dating, or you're trying to just to figure out which person to get exclusive with, or there almost has to be a decision precluding that I am to be married one day, or at least I am seriously considering that I am meant to be married. I mean, since most are meant to be married, and maybe during the course of that, there is a shift, right? That they are determined that they have some other vocation, but for the most part, the dating process, there should be some kind of a decision, don't you think, that I'm going to look for the person that I will take this to the next level of what my ultimate goal is, which is my vocation, as opposed to just hanging out, just going from person to person.
Yeah. The vocation to marriage is the default vocation, I think, for most human beings. I was not called as far as I know, by God to marriage. Certainly at this point in my life, I would say it's pretty clear I was not called to marriage. I was called to be a celibate priest. But the majority of people, including my own mother and father, I'm happy to say, were called to marriage, okay? And two of my sisters were called to marriage, and I'm very happy that they were. Most people are called to marriage. And so unless you have some very good reason to think that you are not called to marriage, I would say presume that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, then proceed to do what is required in order to get married, in order to be a good husband, a good wife. And of course, you say, well, whom am I going to marry out of all these persons that I know? I say, well, I don't know, but choose one.
Yes.
In other words, you have a jar of jelly beans. This sounds a little trivial. And if you spin your wheels and say, I don't know which jelly bean to take, well, take one, because if you don't take one, pretty soon there aren't going to be any jelly beans left, you know.
Or the jelly beans will go stale because no one's taking them.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
I mean, you're right. I mean, the decisions have to be made, and I think that's the good point. That I think a lot of people don't consider that marriage is a default. It's almost like something that comes natural just because of birth into this world.
Yeah.
You're by default meant to marry and propagate, the whole concept of how God created man and social beings. So you look for a short time to find out if you are called to a different vocation, one that includes celibacy, pretty much,
Right.
for the which seem to be the alternatives. And then, if not, otherwise, until you hear that, you proceed in the decision-making process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not rocket science, is it?
No, it's really not. No. You choose a college. You know, you're a junior or senior in high school, and you're thinking about different colleges you could go to. Well, for crying out loud, choose one. If you say, you know, yeah, I do want to go to college, but I'm just not sure which one. You'll be 35, 40 years old, and saying, are you going to go to college? You want to go to college? You don't have to go to college, but you say you want to go to college, right? Yeah, I want to go to college, but I don't know which one. Well, how old will you be by the time you decide, you know?
And there's nothing more frustrating than an indecisive person that you just want to throw up your hands and go, all right, whatever, and you leave and you move forward, you know?
Right.
Well, let's take a moment now and turn to our experts on this subject of decision making.
Any Catholic young man or young woman, and I'm talking starting in late teens, including going into the university, the most important thing they should be looking for is to find the person they're going to spend the rest of their life for, unless they have a different vocation, which they also could discern. Therefore, the idea of putting off marriage, I'm not saying that in particular cases there aren't reasons to, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you, in other words, why would you delay your life is relatively short, even though it's now longer than it might have been a century ago. This opportunity to have a partnership, a friendship, which can have such a great good both for the spouses in terms of a way to holiness and to the future family, on account of economic reasons or professional reasons, or I need to finish law school or business school, or I need to finish this business. That is, the very nature of love, it should be a jump, not into the unknown. This is a little bit what we're talking about here, but it has to be a venture of faith, to use words of Cardinal Newman, that a person saying, I'm young, I'm strong, and I'm ready, and our love is, it's the old Gershwin song, our love is here to stay. But, this is something that now's the time.
You hear young people say, especially young women more than young men, he's not ready to commit. That's a phrase, right? We hear it all the time, he's not ready to commit, which is another way of saying not ready to decide. I like to point out to young people that the word decide is an interesting word. It comes from the Latin decidere, which means to cut off. And if you think about it, that has all kinds of ramifications. You're going along a certain path and you come to a place where the road goes this way and it goes that way, and you have to make a decision. And when you decide to go that way, you've cut off the possibility of going the other way.
When you choose, you lose. And that's what people don't want to do. They don't want to change, and they don't want to lose. I don't want to change who I am, and I don't want to lose my independence. The idea that you surrender what you have to get something better takes a leap of faith. And a lot of people don't have that because they want to hold on to what they have in the mistaken belief that somebody will come along and touch them and just make everything right without them having to change or do anything. But that's delusional. So what I would suggest is that when people say that I can't decide, what it means is that they have made a decision not to make a choice. And indecisiveness is a decision, and it's the worst decision you could make. Because if you make a decision and the decision is wrong, many times you can correct it or learn from it. But if you don't make a decision, you never know whether one thing was right and the other thing was wrong. And you remain in a state of suspended animation, not knowing. And that may be okay for some people, but I think in the long term it's disastrous.
I think it's better to overdo it in the area of explaining your intention than to leave it just out there. It's a shame that it needs to be done this way, but because of our culture, women have met so many men that just sort of want to maybe not commit and just go out with a lot of different women all at once, maybe take them out multiple times, show a lot of interest, but they may not be ready to commit. First of all, I would caution a man in doing that. But because of that, if you're truly pursuing a woman, I think it's important that you tell them right up front, look, I just want you to know the type of person I am and what I'm looking for. And, you know, of course we need to take the steps in that direction. But, you know, I am looking to get married. And, you know, not today, obviously, but this is my goal here with getting to know you. And it doesn't have, it sounds so formal when I'm saying it to you. It doesn't have to necessarily be that formal. You can let someone know in subtle ways.
Decision is, of course, absolutely essential to living a full human life. I mean, there are so many people with regard to marriage and the important familial relations of their life, but with regard to a lot of other things, who are indecisive and who are fearful, basically. I mean, why will we not decide? Because we're afraid that we're going to make the wrong decision.
One of the things that is going on with people putting off marriage is the unsatisfaction of finding a perfect partner. As I said, we have a society where you have to have what's perfect for you. Just has to fit. And we grow up with that. So naturally, people are waiting. Now, maybe it isn't such a bad idea that they wait for a while, because the old problem used to be they got married too young. Marry in haste, repent in leisure. Now they do defer marriage, but it depends on what they mean by deferring marriage. Are they leading a promiscuous life, a life of sexual indulgence while they're waiting? Or are they leading a chaste life and paying the $2 and doing what they're supposed to be doing?
We've all heard that expression of, I think theoretically, of St. Augustine, work is everything dependent upon you, pray is everything dependent upon God. Well, that's completely true in terms of getting married or you're preparing for marriage. Is you have to take ownership and responsibility, and you'll find the right person. It's not going to be Superman or Miss America. It's going to be that person with whom you feel that you can enter into holy marriage in which you will both grow in holiness and you'll grow in happiness, and also you'll be able to diffuse that happiness to the people around you. Perhaps your children, but other couples, other families. There's so many different ways to give yourself.
This is, in a city here like New York, this is something you hear all the time from young women. You know, all the men I meet are either gay or are just out for, you know, a one-night stand or however many successive one nights they find satisfying. They are not prepared to commit. And you have to understand, I mean, from a purely selfish viewpoint of social and sexual satisfaction, you can ask the question very bluntly, why should they commit? You know? But of course, they're missing out on what human nature requires and God provides in the beauty of a marriage, which is ever so much more than simply satisfying your erotic desires or having a good time, but is everything that we've been talking about in terms of the sacrament of marriage.
People often talk about, especially single women, and some of the reasons why they're not married, for example. And people can say, well, you know, now women are educated and they have careers and they kind of push marriage off and because they want to have careers. That's not necessarily the case for every woman. It just may be that that person has not entered their life yet, and that's not necessarily their fault. Sometimes it can be. But sometimes it's the other person's fault too. You know, that person that I am supposed to be with perhaps was not doing his job wherever he is, wasn't listening to, you know, the call of the Spirit in one circumstance or another. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and the timing, I think, is one of them on both sides.
Have these changes over these last several decades created a circumstance more difficult? Yes, more difficult, especially for young women and not so young women, and young women who are worrying about very soon being not so young women. But it's created a great spiritual peril, of course, for men as well, because it has encouraged the most egocentric and selfish dimensions of the human personality.
Another good point there brought up, certainty. It seems very clear that you can't really know for certain in these decisions that you're called to make at every moment. There's little decisions every day that we make, but then of course the big decisions that we have to make. You could go crazy waiting for certainty and making the decisions.
Here's my life experience example. When I was 27 years old, I was ordained a deacon. Another year later, I was 28, I was ordained a priest. And when you take upon yourself the obligations of being a deacon, that's when you take upon yourself the obligation of celibacy. So here I was, 27 years old, on deck to be ordained a deacon, and being required by church law to write out in longhand a statement saying that I know what celibacy means, which basically means that I know about the birds and the bees, and that I freely and without any compulsion or fear or anything like that, I agree to choose to be a celibate, you know, which means that I will not have sexual intimacy or anything that approaches sexual intimacy with any human being for the rest of my life, okay? So, what does a 27-year-old young man do before he makes such a commitment? He goes to talk to somebody who's older and wiser, okay? So I went to a priest whose name was Father Thomas Smith. That was actually his name, Tom Smith. May he rest in peace. Great man, wonderful man. And he was my fountain of wisdom back when I was in my 20s. So I said to Father Smith, as you know, I said, Father, I'm going to be ordained a deacon, but I have to petition for it, and it requires a commitment to celibacy for the rest of my life. I said, do you think that I am called to be a celibate, you know? And he said to me, well, he said, have you been celibate up to this point in your life? And I said, to be honest with you, yes, I have. He said, well, he said, if God has kept you celibate up to age 27, he could probably do it for the rest of your life, if you can. And I said, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. There was no charge for that advice, But I laugh about it because it's so obvious, do you know what I mean? Can I do it? What about the future? We say, well, the best guide to the future is the past. Is it very likely, Mr. Buono, that you will ever rob a convenience store? And the answer to that is this. Have you ever robbed a convenience store? May I ask you that? Have you ever?
No.
No. Okay, good. I'm glad you said no. Then I would predict, Mr. Buono, that you will never rob a convenience store. You follow me? So don't worry about it.
Well, that's another thing off my list to worry
Things
about.
to worry about, right, exactly, yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes we just overanalyze, overthink, over everything to the point of no decisions are made. We hide behind God. God will deliver this. He will make it happen, and then it'll be obvious to us, right? How many things in decision making are really obvious when it comes to God's will?
Yeah, hardly anything is obvious. You used the word certain a while ago. Let me go back to my silly example of the convenience store. At the present time, I'm pushing on to my 70th birthday. I'm telling you the truth. This is not a lie, Mr. Buono. You'll have to take my word for it. I have never robbed a convenience store in my life. Okay, that's the truth.
Okay.
Now, am I certain that I will never rob a convenience store in my life? Am I certain? To be honest with you, no, I'm not. But I would say I'm not worried about it, because I would say the likelihood is extraordinarily slim, and gets slimmer as time goes by. So if we're looking for absolute certainty, we're not going to find it. Okay.
So in choosing for marriage, you look for these conditions. What will happen? What you hope to happen? And do I have a guarantee that this person will please me or look like they do now and make me happy all the days of my life? There is no certainty to that.
No, there's no money back guarantee. But I am not simply, a hopeless, piece of, as you say, flotsam and jetsam on the sea of life. I am in control of myself. There's a poem which goes like this. How does it go? I am the master of my intellect. I am the captain of my soul. Okay, that's at least part of the poem. I can't remember the whole thing now, which you're just happy about, I'm sure. But I like those lines. I am the master of my intellect. I am the captain of my soul. Meaning, basically, I control myself. I control myself. Helping me to control myself, helping any human being to control him or herself, is avoidance of mind-altering chemicals. Okay, people who give into mind-altering chemicals, which would include booze, alcohol, are less likely to be in control of themselves.
Do you think that there's such a thing as over-discernment? There's a lot of people discerning their vocation, and in a way, discerning marriage. We just talked about how proper disposition should be a default, but are we over-discerning ourselves into making no decision about our vocation?
I think to discern when you are 18 or 20 is understandable and is good. To be discerning, to continue to discern one's fundamental vocation when one is 35 or 40 is a little bit warped, I would say. It's an excuse for inaction. Okay, and human beings are great at finding excuses not to act.
And you would say that postponement of marriage, which most are called to, is in a way not putting God first in the scheme of things, but rather the person. I mean, we're called to marriage in a way, the person is less relevant than God's will and what he wants of us.
Right. There is one certainty about my destiny and a certainty about your destiny, and your destiny and mine are the same. And our destiny is union with God. And we only have a limited amount of time in order to attain that ultimate destiny, okay? How many years? 70? I don't know, 80? Not too many people live to be 90. But, you know, within a certain span of years, we are to attain that ultimate goal, and everything else is negotiable. Do what seems reasonable during that period of time, okay? And we always remember, even this will sound very unromantic, but it's true, even marriage is limited to this lifetime, okay? Marriage does not exist in heaven. We have Jesus' word for that in heaven there is neither marrying nor giving in marriage, okay? So do what you have to do now.
Right.
Love your wife, love your husband. If God gives you the gift of children, as he usually does, bear them, raise them, love them, help them to be decent human beings, and that's your job. That's the vocation. That's what God wants you to do.
So if certainty is what you're looking for in life before you make your vocation decision, it's not going to be there. So much of it is taking leaps of faith, risking, and then living with your decisions. And for you, especially men out there, since it still is the norm that men make the proposals for marriage, ask the women out on dates, what have you, be men of decision-making quality, not indecisive, and women find that very attractive. And that's all the time we have today, Father. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go to our website, www.roadtocana.com, for more of our resources and more of these type of programs, and of course this one, and share them with others. There's a lot of work to do in helping young people and older people, for that matter, for marriage. And remember, while you're on this road, to trust in God's plan for you. Act, make decisions, and keep Christ's peace with you always.
On the road